As everyone should have an agenda, you will see that we are ready for the prepared speech section of our meeting. Our first speaker, Ken Krawchuk. Ken is presenting speech number 4 from the Interpretive Reading Manual, and his goal is to present a portion of a play involving only 2 characters. For his reading, he chose a courtroom scene from his novel, Atlas Snubbed. The story commences in a post-apocalyptic Las Vegas where a much-reduced population tries to set up a system of justice in a world where government has collapsed and vanished. The title of this vignette is Eddie and the Bandit. Distinguished Toastmaster Ken Krawchuk.
The gavel cracked. "All rise," the hastily recruited bailiff called out as the door to the judge's chambers opened. "No," Eddie cried automatically, stopping in the doorway. In front of him, the courtroom was populated with dozens of people. Half were already standing, half sitting, with a few caught midway in the act, uncertain whether to complete the action in either direction. "Sit down, please," he called out. "It's only me. You don't have to get up." The standee sat as one as Eddie strode with a confidence he did not feel to take his seat behind a large, ornate desk upon a raised dais. "All right, this court will come to order." "Objection!" It was the Bandit. He was manacled to a burly policeman, wrist to wrist, co-joint Siamese twins, seated at a table midway between Eddie and the audience. What? Eddie blinked myopically. The unexpected interruption had taken him completely by surprise. "What's your objection?" The Bandit fixed a squinting gaze on Eddie and jabbed an accusing finger in his direction. "You're no judge. You have no robe. You have no power over me." "You're right," he admitted lightly. "I'm no judge. I have no robe, and I have no power over you. But I promise I'll do my best to make sure you get a fair trial." "No, it's the law. This trial cannot proceed without a real judge." "Sure it can," Eddie explained patiently. "Because it's not the judge who's important here. It's the jury. You're accused of robbing that woman at gunpoint." He pointed the front row to an extraordinarily, stunningly pretty young lady in the front row. "And it'll be the jury who decides your guilt or innocence, not me. I'm only here acting as sort of a referee. I'll be doing no judging today." "But that's not what the law says a judge should do." "It's what I do," he said simply. "But if there's no judge, you have to set me free." "Why is that?" "Because you're no judge." "I'll be the judge of that." "Better yet," Eddie turned to the audience, "how many of you accept me here as judge today?" Every hand in the audience went up, and at the table in front of Eddie, the burly policeman raised his own manacled wrist, dragging along with it the arm of the Bandit, lifting both their arms into the air. A satisfied, mischievous smile spread across the policeman's husky face. The Bandit threw the man an annoyed scowl before jerking both of their arms back down. Eddie scanned the crowd. "Okay, it looks unanimous. Let's get going." He quickly estimated the number of people in the audience and divided by 7. "Okay, starting with you," he pointed to a teenager in the front row. "Every 7th person, begin counting off. I want every 7th person, please take a seat in the jury box." A panicked buzz of conversation instantly filled the air as the members of the audience reacted to the unexpected duty that was being asked of them. "Objection!" Patiently, Eddie faced the Bandit. "What is it this time?" "You can't do that. I know the law. I'm allowed to interview each prospective juror." "Interview them? What for?" "I get to reject the ones I don't like." Eddie blinked twice. "You mean you want to stack the jury?" The Bandit hesitated. He'd never thought of it in those terms before. "But it's my right," he finally said. Recovering, Eddie flatly replied, "No, it isn't. Picking and choosing jurors like that wouldn't be fair. We'll just take every 7th person, no questions asked." To the audience, he repeated, "All right, start counting. Every 7th person to the jury box, please." "Objection!" Sternly, Eddie shook a finger at him. "Listen, I said I'm not going to let you stack that jury. But it's the law. Whose law? Again, the bandit hesitated. This trial definitely wasn't following along the normal lines. He didn't know whose law it was. All he knew were the gopher holes of procedure. But he wasn't going to let ignorance stop him. The laws of America, he guessed with forced conviction. Intrigued, Eddie sat and thought for a moment, then added, as if talking to himself, "You know, I'm not sure the laws of America would apply. It's been over a month since the X project exploded, and we've heard nothing from the rest of the country since then. There doesn't seem to be any America any longer." He paused again briefly. "Regardless, if you or I don't know the law, how could we possibly follow it? How else would you suggest that we choose a jury?" Seeing his chance, the bandit interjected, "That's why you have to let me go. You're no judge. You have no law. You have no jury. You have no power over me." Eddie waved an arm across the courtroom. "These people have accepted me as their judge. They will be your jury." "But you have no law," he repeated. Eddie did not hesitate. "The law is that you must do whatever is right." The bandit scoffed. "Yeah, right. What does right mean?" "A fair question. Here's a fair answer. It's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And isn't that enough law for any man? It's all about having the right to live your own life, but also respecting the rights and property of others." "Bah!" the bandit cried with a flourish of his free hand. "Mere words. High-sounding, meaningless words." "They're not meaning," Eddie began, but the bandit cut him off. "Then what right do I have, or anyone else? Tell me that. What rights do I have?" Again, Eddie did not hesitate. "All right, let me spell it out for you. You have the God-given, inalienable right to live your life your way without interference Then let me out of here," he interrupted again. "I was living my own life my own way when you guys interfered." He shook his manacled arm in defiant demonstration of the truth of his statement. Eddie ignored the outburst and continued as if it had not happened. "You have the right, provided, do you hear me? Provided that you respect the rights and property of others. You did not respect this woman's right to live her life her own way, even though she was respecting yours." "Respect," the bandit sneered. "Don't talk to me about respect. Your entire capitalist system lacks respect. If a man has no money, your system would let him starve. Doesn't a man's privation give him the right to take what he needs?" He gestured unconsciously toward the victim he had robbed. Eddie shook his head slowly. "Not if she has the right to her own life and property too. You have a responsibility to respect that right, or else you can't expect others to respect yours." The bandit replied with mocking sarcasm. "Exactly where did I pick up this responsibility to her?" Eddie ignored the contempt and answered sincerely. "Responsibility is an integral part of your rights, because for every right you enjoy, you have a corresponding responsibility to respect that right in others. So, for example, you have the right to live your life, but you have the corresponding responsibility to respect her right to live her own life. You have the right to your property, but you have the corresponding responsibility to respect the property of others. Rights and responsibility are two sides of the same coin." "And what coin is that?" "Liberty." For several seconds after the echoes of his word died away, not a sound could be heard. The bandit was first to react. "So you're saying that my rights come with strings attached?" "Not strings so much as intertwined obligations. I'd call it personal freedom tempered by personal responsibility." "And how far does this responsibility extend?" he inquired derisively. "What limit do you place upon my rights?" Eddie considered the question for a moment. "To use an analogy, your right to swing your fist begins where her nose... Your right to swing your fist ends where her nose begins." At a sudden thought, he corrected himself. "No, wait, that's not quite correct. Even swinging your fist at someone shows a lack of respect. It stands to reason that threats of violence cannot be considered respectful. Now can they?" He stared off into space for a moment, surprised at the veracity of his own words. The bandit hesitated as well. "But I have a right," he reiterated with hollow conviction. not knowing what else to say, as if the mere repetition of the word would make it true, while understanding fully that it wouldn't. He subsided finally into a moody silence. Seeing that no answer was imminent, Eddie sat straight up in his chair, and in the audience he politely requested, "Okay, now that that's settled, every seventh person to the jury box, please." Uncertainly, the count-off began, and in short order, 4 men and 3 women took their new seats in the jury box. The bandit grumbled to himself inaudibly at the table in front of him, not looking up. "Okay, let's have the victim tell her side of it. Miss?" At Eddie's behest, the attractive woman stepped up to the witness stand demurely and took a seat. He nodded to her gravely and said, "All right, please tell us what happened." "Hey!" shouted the bandit. "Objection!" "What now?" Eddie asked patiently. "She has to be sworn in." "Why is that?" The bandit hesitated uncertainly. Clearly he was not performing at his best this morning. So we know she's not lying?" He didn't sound too certain of his own assertion. Eddie placed a palm against his cheek, leaned on his elbow, and looked perplexed. But if she were going to lie, wouldn't she just lie about swearing to tell the truth? Either she's honest or she's not. It's up to the jury to take her at her word or not. "Well, then what's to stop me from lying to you?" "Nothing. Was there ever anything to stop you except yourself?" The bandit opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came forth. Eddie turned to the victim. "Proceed." In an incongruently cheerful voice, she told her story of the evening in question, exactly as it happened. How she was walking home with the evening's receipts in her handbag, how the bandit had approached her and demanded the money at gunpoint, how she complied and ran, and in a minute, her story was through. Eddie dismissed the woman and called up the policeman. And with professional detachment, the man related how he had watched the entire incident from the bedroom of the busybody widow, how he had seen the masked bandit approach his victim, heard the demand for money, saw her throw her purse at him and run away, and how his men had immediately stepped in and apprehended the man. After the completion of the damning testimony, Eddie addressed the bandit directly. "Do you wish to call any witnesses?" Sullen silence echoed around the room. "I'll take that as a no." After a respectful pause, Eddie turned to the bailiff. "Okay, please take the jurors to the deliberation room." He gently clapped the gavel on the surface of his desk. "We'll wait until they decide." As they left, one of the jurors called out over her shoulder, "And you can bet that won't be long." The bandit sat up with a start, as if he were going to object to something, but he thought better of it and subsided. Standing up and stretching, Eddie commented, "In that case, I think we'll wait right here." The jurors returned. It couldn't have been more than 3 minutes. Definitely a bad sign for the bandit, to be sure. Their faces blank, the 7 filed back into the jury box, as the audience and Eddie reclaimed their seats as well. Once everyone settled down, Eddie asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" One of the jurors stood up, the woman who had warned of a quick verdict. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." Eddie could not help but wince at being addressed as Your Honor, but he tried not to let it show. "Well, what say you?" "Guilty!" The gallery sat silent. No one was surprised by either the verdict or the restrained reaction. But electric anticipation hung heavy in the air. They all knew it was coming next. In silence, Eddie locked eyes with the bandit. His words echoed clearly across the room. "The idea of tossing you in jail is personally repugnant to me, not to mention the question of who pays for the cost of keeping you there. Tell me, do you want to go to jail?" The bandit remained silent at first, but then stirred in his seat. "No," was all he said. Eddie nodded. "Then I think I can work out something that might be a little better for all of us." He sat straight up and assumed a more formal pose. The sentencing was about to begin. Many in the gallery straightened in unconscious imitation, sensing the moment of truth was at hand. Having been found guilty by a jury of your peers of not respecting the rights of another, I recommend the following sentence. By your actions, you have demonstrated that you cannot be trusted to roam freely in our society, so I believe it appropriate that you be exiled from Las Vegas for the period of 1 year. The audience murmured its surprise. It was not what they had expected. The bandit did not react, and Eddie waited for silence from the audience before he continued. I further recommend that you spend your year confined to the vicinity of the Boulder Dam power plant. While you are there, you will be presented with an opportunity to learn how the power plant operates, and you shall be given the chance to apply your knowledge as a worker. If you choose to take the job, you will be paid a fair wage during your exile. But if you cause trouble, then the remainder of your year will be spent here in jail in town, where you'll perform whatever menial actions are necessary to pay for your board. He paused for a brief moment, indicating he had finished, and then added tentatively, "Okay?" Caught off guard, the bandit gaped. "Okay? What do you mean, okay?" "I mean, you accept the sentence." Eddie explained it succinctly, knowing full well he had no authority to impose it directly. As far as he was concerned, it was up to the bandit to accept it or not. He fervently hoped the answer would be yes, because he wasn't entirely sure what he would do should the sentence be rejected. The bandit did not react at first, but soon a small smile crossed his face. He had recognized the same absence of an alternative. "And what if I refuse?" Eddie shrugged. "You're a smart fellow. I don't think you will." The bandit sat for almost a full minute, quietly considering his plight. Like Eddie, he was unsure what would happen if he refused. He silently reviewed his options one last time, and as the last of the minute began to die, he finally spoke. "I accept exile." The audience burst into spontaneous applause. Rather than the somber moment which characterized most sentencing, the mood was one of unexpected jubilation. Many of the men had feared that a milquetoast Eddie might prove to be too lenient, while others feared that an inexperienced judge would overreact with an unduly heavy hand. But having the bandit not only removed from the company of law-abiding citizenry for a reasonable period, and also set on a path to rehabilitation, allayed all such doubts. Not only had vengeance been served this day, but justice as well. His work here done, Eddie rose to leave. But as he did, to his surprise, all conversation in the room came to a quick, abrupt halt. All eyes were upon him now. He stood self-consciously aware of their stares. He felt it incumbent upon himself to say something profound. But instead, he retreated into the retreat. To the bandit, he simply said, "Welcome aboard." To the audience, he said, "This court is adjourned." The crowd exploded in cheers as Eddie turned and left.
Thank you, Ken. And to reiterate what I took from what Ken shared, rights, responsibility, and respect. Thank you so much again for sharing, Ken.